The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ebrahim Patel, has unveiled the Electric Vehicles Transitional Roadmap. This follows Cabinet's approval of the white paper on EVs that aims to ensure that the country becomes part of the global shift from internal combustion engines to new technology vehicles. Ntokozo Khumalo is standing by to give us more details in terms of, firstly, what are we talking about, what is the aim, and where does electricity fit in?
Good afternoon, Dudu. Well, Minister Patel also gave details into the commercialization strategy around hydrogen in South Africa. And as a starting point, before we get details into the EVs on the back of COP28, I would like us to start that conversation with the Minister there. Thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon. Now, two sets of documents that we went through this morning, and I'd like us to start with hydrogen. As a potential in moving and decarbonizing industries in the country. But talk us through, the cost that we've seen of climate change, over 120 billion for Southern Africa over the last 4 decades. But hydrogen doesn't exactly come cheap, does it?
No, it does not. But hydrogen is also an enormous fuel source. And societies across the world currently already use hydrogen. But they use what is called grey hydrogen or blue hydrogen. The challenge has been to get to green hydrogen. And the big difference between green hydrogen and the other sources of hydrogen is what energy do you use in the production of your ammonia and the other things that makes up hydrogen. Renewable energy, sun, wind, hydro, are typically the sources to turn hydrogen into green hydrogen. And historically, because of the fact that hydrogen has not been the most competitive energy source, the level of investment that is required hasn't taken place. We're seeing that changing now. Across the world, companies and countries are becoming early adopters of green hydrogen. A number of countries are now finalizing the thinking about green hydrogen. At COP28, there's been a focus, a discussion on energy sources that can provide the fuel of the future. And those who follow these things see that we're on the cusp of a very big transition now. If the 20th century was known as the century of oil and nuclear, the 21st century can be known as the century of renewables and green hydrogen. South Africa is well positioned. We've got some fantastic positives: sunlight, wind. We've got this enormous stock of PGM metals, platinum group metals. All of these are important either as catalyzers or as energy sources in green hydrogen. So today's announcement is really taking these two areas and indicating the green industrialization path that South Africa is embracing.
And obviously when it comes to hydrogen, we are talking the commercialization strategy for South Africa and talking EVs. Some of their commercialization strategy was, of course, in electric vehicles, but some of that heavy-duty vehicles. What other industries then in that commercialization plan are we seeing benefiting from moving towards hydrogen?
There is what is called hard-to-abate sectors. It's sectors that use huge quantities of energy and where typically they're not able to rely only on renewable energies like wind and solar. A good example of it is the cement industry, and another example is the steel industry, as is the producers of fertilizers. These sectors require greener sources of energy, and green hydrogen is well positioned to be the principal source of energy in plants like that. That opens up the opportunity for South Africa to tap into the green steel market globally and to be a big producer of fertilizers. We already have a significant opportunity with the global rise in fertilizer prices. And one of our producers of fertilizers would be a big beneficiary if we can go green hydrogen. And of course, cement is always needed in a society and green cement would help South Africa to meet our own climate goals too. So for these reasons, there's no question about it, that if we can make the economics of green hydrogen work, it will be really good news for South Africa. So the commercialization strategy is trying to deal with the gap between where we are and where we need to be.
And then just let's circle back to the electric vehicles, white paper, that also long-awaited document when it comes to just how we implement that production in South Africa, implemented in 2 phases. Could you talk us through what those 2 phases will actually focus on?
So the electric vehicle roadmap, or the transition, sees that in phase 1 we're going to focus mainly on boosting production for export. We want to be able to get into the European Union and the UK markets. And the reason for doing that is South Africa produces more than 500,000 cars a year. And about half of that is sold in the EU and in the UK. Those markets are the furthest in ensuring or in putting in place regulatory arrangements that will ban internal combustion engines in future, or certainly new internal combustion engine vehicles. So if we are going to retain that, because it's tens of thousands of South African jobs involved, the industry employs more than 110,000 people, then we've got to make that transition. The second phase will be the adoption of electric vehicles in the South African market. That will go a little bit slower, partly because we don't yet have energy grid stability, and so much of our energy that is produced comes from high emission sources like coal. So as we green our grid more and more, it makes more climate sense for consumers to shift to electric vehicles. But we're not there yet. If today you buy an electric vehicle in South Africa, you're using coal to charge the battery every day. And so that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the speed with which, I would call it a two-speed transition. In that first speed, it would be production and exports. In the second speed, it would be the domestic market. And of course, there's opportunities also in that second phase elsewhere on the African continent. So we are busy now putting the final arrangements for rules of origin on cars in place for the African Continental Free Trade Area.
And just speaking about that, then what is the importance, just before I let you go, Minister, the importance of then that regional collaboration to make all of these plans actually work and be sustainable in the long term?
Very important. Africa sits with one of the largest stocks of critical minerals in the world. Previously, Africa had oil and coal. Nigeria is one of the big producers of oil. South Africa is a big producer of coal. But in the age of carbon industrialization, we simply became the providers of the raw materials for other parts of the world to industrialize. We've got to make sure that in the green age, we use those critical minerals to build more factories, more plants, and more production capabilities here on the African continent, which provides opportunities for young people, but it also adds to the industrial sophistication of our economy and that of neighboring countries. So part of the white paper has a regional strategy to try to tap into critical minerals.
Minister, thank you so much for those insights. Of course, to do that is Minister Ebrahim Patel with the DTIC, and I trust that that information was sufficient for viewers, just giving some details on that electric vehicles white paper, the roadmap that will, of course, give the country some direction in terms of how we start that production. And as he said, South African consumers can start expecting to be able to drive electric cars around 2038 with first production expected around 2026. The ball is now in the finance minister's court when it comes to some of the incentives that could come specifically for the automotive industry as it moves towards the production of electric vehicles. And on the back of COP28, South Africa really just outlining that commercialization strategy for hydrogen and the potential that it has for clean energy. It's back to you in studio, Dudu.
So, Ntokozo, before we let you go on the electric vehicles, does that mean that the electricity situation will be sorted in order to make this a reality?
Well, those are the hopes, Dudu, but Ebrahim Patel did say that those are some of the obstacles that could stand in the way in how fast we actually get there. He did say that the 2026 of producing, those electric vehicles is the aim, but it's still penciled in for now, Dudu, so it will have to take us seeing where we are when it comes to energy security in the country. And I suppose that is where then that energy mix, or diversifying our energy mix to add on other energy sources such as hydrogen, comes in just as a way to try and fast track us being able to reach the point of energy security and get those plans rolling, Dudu.
Thank you very much, Ntokozo Khumalo, for that report.